Does Slay the Spire actually slay? Let's find out today on Should You Buy Slay the Spire. Hey guys, what's going on? Basin Boy here, and welcome to another video on the channel in this series that we're calling Should You Buy? It's more of a game review sort of idea. If this is your first video on the channel, we like to break it down into multiple different categories. The first being graphics, then moving on to the social aspects, which talks about mods or any multiplayer that might be in the game, audio, soundtrack, any different audio effects that might add to the game, gameplay, which talks about the gameplay, value, is the price actually worth what you're paying? The technical, which is more for PC sort of players, what type of things do you need in your PC to be able to run the game? Narrative, which talks about the story, and that's where we will get into spoiler territory, if there is any spoilers. And with the narrative aspect, we will move on to DLC and talk about that, if that is available. Then we will wrap up the video with my overall opinion, and I'll give it a score at the end. Let's start off with an introduction. Slay the Spire is a roguelike video game developed by American studio Megacrit and published by Humble Bundle. The game was first released in early access for Microsoft Windows, Mac OS, and Linux in late 2017, with an official release in January 2019. It was released for PlayStation 4 in May 2019 and for Nintendo Switch later in June 2019. Let's jump into our first section, which is graphics. The graphics have a 2D style, as you can see on screen through the gameplay. The graphics are really interesting and completely change the way of the different levels that you go throughout the game. As you're climbing the spire, it might start off more red, and then it goes into a town-like, and then it goes to green at the final level of the game. Enemies can seem truly terrifying. If it's a nightmare sort of creature, it definitely has that nightmare look and feeling to it. But on the flip side, you have enemies that are funny, like one of the bosses in the game called Dono and Deca. One looks like a donut and the other one's like a weird oblong shape sort of thing. It's kind of funny. Finally, the cards look amazing. There's definitely little tiny details that are put on the cards that really make the game kind of come alive. They kind of look cartoony, but it goes perfectly with the style that they were going for in the graphics. Moving on to the social aspect, we're talking about the Steam Workshop. That's really the only social aspect that they have during the game. Right now in the Steam Workshop, there's a bunch of different mods. The one that seems to be very popular is changing the look of the main character. For example, I just saw one with Hollow Knight being in charge of the rogue character in the game. Since social was so small, we'll move on to audio. In terms of sound effects, each card has a specific sound effect to it. If you're slicing something, it has a slice sound to it. If you're throwing poison at somebody, it makes it sound like a poison bottle just broke in front of them. When enemies take damage, they really sound like they take damage as well. The cards that cost more energy, as you can see on screen, have definitely a more impactful sound effect than ones that might cost less energy. This actually makes you feel like you're actually doing more damage, and you can see that on the health bar. Each characters have unique sounds to them. Your characters as well, when they take damage, they have a unique sound. Each enemy has a unique sound. For example, the cultists, which kind of look like birds, they make bird sounds. Not exactly bird sounds, but bird sounds that a human might make. There's also an enemy called slavers. When you first encounter them, they have a creepy laugh of some sort. It really makes them feel terrifying and that they do actually want to take you away. It really makes the world feel more alive, I guess you could say. Even in a card game like this, when you don't have a narrative necessarily. Moving on to my favorite part of any game, which is the soundtrack. This soundtrack is really good. It's immersive and it creates a unique experience. It helps make harder battles that you might have feel more harder because the music picks up, it gets a little bit louder than it was in the other ones. It really makes the game feel more alive. Now the biggest section that we have here is the gameplay. Slay the Spire is a combination of roguelike gameplay with a deck building card game. At the start of the playthrough, the player selects one of 3 determined classes. The Ironclad, which is a warrior or a tank, the Silent, which is a rogue-like character, and the Defect, which kind of plays like a mage, but it has a unique playstyle compared to the other two. Each of these characters has a starting amount of health, gold, and you get to pick a relic which has specific skills or abilities that can be unique to characters. And each character has an initial deck of cards which is unique to them. In the starting decks, you will have attack cards as well as defense cards, and potential color-coded cards which tailor to the specific characters that you might be working with. For the Ironclad, it might be defensive base or even more damage. For the Silent, it might be poison or any specific neutralize abilities. For the defect, it probably has something to do more with electric or magic or the special thing that it might have. The goal is to work through several levels of the Spire, each level having a number of potential encounters distributed in a branching structure with a boss character at the end of each level. These counters include monsters, campfires to be able to heal or upgrade, shopkeepers to buy cards, relics, potions, anything you might want, chests with random loot, and random encounters that you might not know what's coming up because there's a question mark there. Moving on to combat. Combat is played in turns. Each turn the player receives a fresh hand of cards and they have 3 energy points. The player can play a combination of cards as long as they have the energy to pay for each card. At the end of the turn, any cards that weren't played will go back into the discard pile. Players' cards vary because of the character, but generally consist of attack, defense, or skill cards that debuff or can benefit the character in different ways. Each opponent on the field will telegraph their specific way to attack you. If you're attacking more, they might block more. If you're defending more, they might attack more. They might use a skill that negatively impacts you. In some cases, the opponent's attack or the player's cards may add unplayable cards, representing battle conditions like wounds, you're dazed, anything in between that. The player can determine the best strategy to avoid taking any damage after they complete their turn. If the player's health drops to 0, the game is over and they must restart from the bottom of the Spire. Otherwise, if the player defeats the monsters in an encounter, they typically receive gold, and as I said before, a chance of a card being added into their deck. They can choose from 3 cards on screen. Other loot can be obtained by defeating harder monsters like elites or big bosses that might give them relics. Specific relics might help increase your maximum health, it might heal you, it might add you'd be able to hold on to cards in your hand. Some drop potions as well that you can use one time. This game requires the players to develop a strategy for their deck on the fly based on the cards they obtain from loot and synergize with the other cards that they might have. Like other deck building games, too many weak cards and unplayable cards can make the deck ineffective when you're later in the game. Slay Spire also has a metagaming aspects. Completed or failed runs contribute to points towards unlocking new characters and relics that can be made available for the player. Ascension mode provides several new challenges. For example, enemies get harder, you have lower maximum health. It goes all the way up until it was 20, but I think it goes past that now, even more. A daily challenge provides unique challenges for the player itself. Some might be you don't get any relics, some might be you have 4 maximum health and you can't take damage. It's really interesting to see the different types of ideas that the devs come up with when they're making this. So from that, let's move on to the value. Right now on Steam and PlayStation 4, it is $24.99. And on the Switch, we don't know the exact price yet because it hasn't come out. It comes out in June of 2019. Replayability, in my opinion, is completely off the charts. I think for a $25 game, this is a steal. I would probably pay anywhere up to $40 for it. I have over 100 hours in the game right now as well. Moving on to the technical aspect, the OS that is recommended, or the minimal, is Windows XP, Vista, 7, 8, 8.1, or 10. The processor needs to have 2.0 GHz. Memory is a 4 GB RAM. Graphics, a 256 megabyte video memory capable of OpenGL 2.0 plus support, and storage, 1 GB available space. So these are the specs that the Steam store published in their thing. If you want more information, you can go look it up on the Steam store. Moving on to the narrative, there isn't really any narrative in this game besides you pick one of the characters and you climb up through the spire. Of course, there's going to be tiny little things that you might learn about the characters through the random encounters that you might have, but as far as we know, there really isn't any story to it. Down below in the description, I'm going to be putting a link to a Steam community where one of the users put aspects of it together to kind of make a story if that interests you. So that's about it for the game. My overall opinion, it's an amazing game that you can keep playing no matter what. It has so much replayability in it between the 3 characters, unlocking new cards, the daily challenges, and the different paths that you can take on your way up through the Spire. Also, you can use different strategies. For example, if I'm playing the Silent, which is the rogue character, I could do an assassin deck where I get a whole bunch of 0-cost cards to stab people in the back. Or I could go poison type if I want to feel like poisoning them and blocking until they die from the poison. It really is really unique. And as I said before, each character has a different playstyle. If you're playing the Ironclad and you really feel like you're a tank warrior, but maybe you want to play a unique character that has really cool ideas, maybe switch to the Defect and see how that works. If you don't like the Defect, then go to the Silent. It's a really cool game, and I recommend that you all check it out. So my score for the game is a 9.4 out of 10. I definitely think that you should pick this up if you have the money and if you're kind of interested after this review. So with that said, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.